Hello, silly people, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Trey, and today we will be continuing with the 100-day march, which is a challenge for myself to try to make a comic 24 pages in the span of 100 days, or thereabouts. And today is very important because it is our second milestone day. We will cover pencils for the month of April. So let's first look to the schedule. So on the schedule, we are in the final week of April, and it is the pencil milestones, where we will print out everything that we have so far in the pencils and then put them in our folder and go over all of that, which is later. Right now, we're leading into May, which is going to be the start of the inking month. The whole month of inking. And I think I might move this milestone from the May 27th to June 3rd, just to give myself just that little bit more time to work on inks, as inks are very important. It's part of the cleanup and refinement phase. And once I get that, I feel like I'll be pretty strong in the home stretch. Now let's get back into where we were with a recap of what we did last week. So last week was page 8, where we introduced Birdie right here. Beautiful Beast Kiss, Bunny, Birdie, and DC, the Demon Cat. So last week we worked on page 8, and we started with this very simple thumbnail, or what I call a thumbnail, which is the very loosest, briefest gesture of what I have in mind for the page. And then after that is a more rough sketch, I call it, where I start to flesh out some of the ideas, the concepts of the page. And things don't have to be too grounded, too resolved, still the written text, but it's a better idea of what I'm going for. And then finally, we have our framing thoughts to make it look like a comic book page, which is chopped into panels. And we try to look at the flow and the text work. And this was all for Birdie's introduction page, page 8. And that was the focus for last week. Now let's talk about page 6, which is the introduction of Demon Cat, DC. Now, since we've done this before, this will be a very quick time-lapse version of my whole process. So on the right-hand side, I have my files. At the top is my character layer, and then I have my frame thoughts layer. I have all my pencils. I try to keep on one layer, and now I'm cleaning it up to get off the written text that I have before we we make visible our text layer that has been typed in. But we've done this all before in the previous 3 weeks. And then once I have my frame thoughts, I can then adjust the size of the characters. I shift them around, try to make sure everything's within the frame, and trying not to compete too much with the text, because the text needs a lot of space. And I try to keep the text within the live area, which is closer towards the center, so it doesn't get chopped off. Say if you're going to print this. And now we make adjustments and a lot of shifting, a lot of erasing and redrawing. And that is pretty much, I keep doing this over and over until I get what I want from the page. And everything is pretty much solidly in place. Like I say, we're closer to the end than the rough thumbnail version. But I have my characters to look at, and to keep myself on model so I'm not drifting to the characters looking totally different from what they're supposed to look. I have this cheat sheet for the characters, and also, it's like from last week, I cheat sometimes by enlarging frames. Like DC on the very top left, I can expand that in the draw on top to make his keyframe for this whole page. But then there's just a lot of detail work. And I go over this over the course of a day. I try to keep, a page a day, from thumbnail version to a rougher pencils like you see here to a more sketch version before I go on to inks. But since I'm inking my own work, there's less of a explaining to somebody else. I kind of know what I want, and there's no handoff. So I can pretty much go in and know, okay, this is how who the character is, what the character is doing, and I'm going through this whole process. So there's less that I have to hand off. So if you're in a chain structure where the writer to the artist to the inker to the colorist and all of that, you have to have more of a role filling type ideas, and you have to make sure things are clear for whoever is next in line after. But since I'm doing this all myself, I can pretty much keep up the flow because I should know most of the stuff for myself, but even then I get lost sometimes. So just keep that in mind. But the lead characters, I try to keep the main focus on them, and I do it in stages. And mostly it's the first stage is just getting them on the page. Second is more or less giving the body structure, keeping my forms pretty much how they should be before I move on to facial expressions, clothing, details, and all that. And I can still go another round, which I'll probably do just before inking, give it another pass, maybe a day before I print it out, and then work on the inks. So this is all, I'm doing more or less everything together. There is really no separation. Things are getting pretty tight because of scheduling. But it's a 100-day challenge. And this is the challenge. Keeping everything within the time frame. Time is your worst enemy. And of course, life will life. So you always have to keep that in mind. So Beautiful Beast Kiss. And since I've joined these characters for about a month now, I'm getting pretty much quicker. Things get quicker the more you draw the same characters over and over and over again. So that's a good part. But still, you need to be careful. Try not to get too lax, too lazy. Because that can happen too when I think, oh, I got this, and then make mistakes. So just keep, one foot in front of the other and keep moving. So that brings me to some thoughts about the process. And being a one-man show means that it's different from, everyone as an artist is different. But since I'm doing it all myself, I have a process or a sequence of events that I usually always go through. Like I was talking about before, the main structure. And then once I have that main structure, then I can build on top of that with the individual characters' look, their expressions, their clothing and costumes and all of that. And sometimes on a whole page, I'll do one character, just that one character, to get all of them locked into place. And then I do, like, say, Bunny, all of her on one page, and then all of Beautiful Beast Kiss all on one page, and then Mach Tun or DC Demon Cat. And sometimes that can help because then you're always in that frame of mind of that certain character. What are their expressions like? And you can kind of portray them more consistently instead of bouncing around all over the place. But it depends on how I feel and time scheduling and all of that. Sometimes I just do everything within the panel, like I'm doing here, enlarging, detail work, and all of that. But also, when I think about the comic panels, the frames, does it flow? Does it read? Can I change things to make things clearer? How big are they in the frame? The backgrounds of the frame, like you can see here, I don't really have backgrounds. I try to save that on its own separate layer, and I usually do that all at one time, and I usually use the briefest of backgrounds. I try not to keep it too complicated, but also the idea that you have a mode of doing things. Like if I'm going to ink, I want to ink it all one way. So say I'm going to do a nib inking, I do it all that one way. I think this time I'm going to do brush inking, and I want to do the whole characters just like that. And while I'm not the best at inking that way, I think that's the challenge for me to move on to the next level. And so I'm going to try that. So say for the backgrounds, I want to do a pastel-y type look for the backgrounds. No hard edge, well, fewer hard edges. A lot of light, loose. I think it fits the characters being younger, more youthful, less serious. And I think the pastels will have pretty good effect with that. Of course, this is all just concepts. I want to do some tests, and then we'll see in the final if I do actually carry through with all of that. But you try to find ways that fit what you're going for. And another thing I want to point out is this is like the plussing stage. I'm pushing things, erasing, redrawing. Push it, you can make this better. So it's all that continual refinement. If something's slightly not off, you can fix it, push it, make it better. Push it, make it better. It's all a build-up on top of previous actions. So I don't have to always just jump in and know exactly what I'm doing. I can build it up layer by layer. And I find that's the best way for me to make my art. It's all iterative. You build up from just the loosest of things, and then you just keep refining, pushing, plussing. And that is usually how I make my pages. So let's wrap up this part of the video before we move on to the milestone portion. And this was a brief recap of page 6, the introduction of Demon Cat, where we first started with a very simple, brief outline. This is my thumbnail phase of the page. Just very loose, very sketchy drawings just to get the idea out with written text. And then after that, we have a more refined, rough sketch version of the page. I used this image blown up and then drawn on top to make his introductory pose. And I fleshed out the characters, still with some written dialogue, but just to give us a better idea of what's going on the page. And then finally, we break it up into panels, and then we type out our word balloons, and we have an idea of what is going on in the page. And that was page 6, the introduction of DC. And now let's move on to the main event, which is putting all these pages together in the milestone. So we have our what we started and completed. All right, this is where we left it, with just the thumbnail versions. Just the thumbnail version of every single page in this 24-page comic. And as you can tell, they don't They don't start exceedingly nice. They just, it's where we start from to where we're going to set up page chapter 4. But now we have a whole new stack, woohoo, of art. And so let's put it back, rearrange it all, and then let's do it. So first off, we gotta take everything out. The last page can be the last page because it doesn't change really. And so now let's get back to the front. Same deal as last time. Take the first page and the second page. The first page will always be a right-hand side page. All right, I gotta check it for problems and whatnot. All right, so let's take a look at the full thing. Here we go. So now we have the milestone complete of all the pencils. Well, not all the pencils, but most of the pencils. So we have Beautiful Beast Kiss, cover illustration, Beautiful Beast Kiss, chapter 3, right on. So we have page 1, and page 1 will always be a right-hand side page. And then we turn it, page 2. 3. I've got my text, I've got my layouts. 4, 5. I try to have something that leads to something else, leads to something else. 6, 7, 8. Got birdie entrance. 9, 10. The entrance of the moon queen, moon princess, she used to be called. 11, and then we transition from here to a transition scene. There will be no frames, no borders. You have to feel the flow. It's a dance amongst the stars. So all the background will be starlight, which is just if you splatter ink on a white piece of paper, and then you invert those colors, you'll get the white will turn black, and it'll be the starry sky. And that will be the backdrop for these two as the dance. And then we transition to a new zone. 14, new setting, and it's kind of like a restart. And I like a lot of this, the panels are similar to the very first frames. Like for example, right, this kind of simulated here and here, and this here. So we're restarting the second zone, the second part of this chapter 3. And so she wakes up from her dream, says, "You can't keep me out. I'll be back." And then she senses what she really desires is the power crystal, the all-spark. And she feels it. She gets like a mental message, and then she takes off. 16, encountering the green sage and the beast. I think I'm gonna enlarge this, I think. So then we're starting the beast battle. got all my text. And at the end, I didn't have as much time to draw as the beginning part, so they're rougher, but I think they're still doable. All right, she tries to attack, he tries to attack her. Boom! But she's still standing strong. Working on the monster's, the beast's face. Flaming fist. And then pow. KO. And she wins. Gets her Allspark. Fragment, shard, energy. And then everything turns green again. The green sage is now not trapped in the tree and is now walking around. Says, hey, thank you. Do you need anything? I'll grant you a wish. And she's like, nah, I got what I needed. Out. And she's on to the next adventure where she tries to get to the moon. And she has an idea about how to get back there through the water. But conk, or gong, and she sinks down to the bottom, and that is the start of a water page and sets up chapter 4. And again, we have all the character designs right here in the back, and that is the milestone. And again, I'd like to say that there is something about seeing, I like this image, there's something about seeing all of it done, all of it put together. I mean, it's not final, but there's the text, there's the sketches, more developed. And so it's coming together, especially from where we came from. She still needs work before I put it to ink, but I now have something that I can start that inks off of. And the hardest part of inking is the beginning. I'm really shaky, really shaking in the beginning of inks. And back to page 1. Nicely done, nicely done. So that is the milestone. 4 pencils done, put in the folder, and we're ready to start the inking process. Again, the inking process will start out slow as I'm really shaky, trying to get back into a rhythm, and then it gets better and you'll get stronger, more developed, more confident, more sure of yourself in the end. So, thank you for joining me. I have been Trey. Next week we'll do a inking tools where we'll talk about, I think I'm going to use mostly brushes for the inking, but we'll go over the tools for inking next week. So thank you for joining me. I have been Trey. You can come catch my work at treyhodges.com. Power to all the creators, and I will see you next time. Keep shining.